But the other members are the central bank governor, secretary of finance, three representatives from the banking sector, the universal, the commercial, and the tip banks. So it was a regulatory capture. So whatever Bangko Central wanted happens. So nothing happened again. They were able, we forgot that under the law, Bangko Central was the one who made the IRR. And in the IRR, it even changed the spirit of the law. For instance, the penalty for violation of the commercial bank, minimum 500,000, they graduated it to the point that there is full, full violation, minor violation, and so so everybody just settled for penalty. Nothing happened again. Nothing happened again. Now we are requesting that the Magna Carta be taken seriously because while we are the most underbanked, is getting worse. Our SME is not getting anything. So what funding wise, there's no funding. We requested actually in the beginning of the hearings that perhaps they can consider giving the SB Corporation a outside of the Bangko Sentral. Because but under the Magna Carta, it is under the still supervision of central bank. The reason is we wanted it to be independent because Bangko Sentral has nothing to do with employment. There's nothing to do with the economy. Their constituency is the banks and stability of prices. They have nothing to do with employment. So whatever they do affects employment very much. So we requested them, Bangko Sentral, finally they basically agreed recently with the governor, the past governor. They sent word to us that they're willing to allow SB Corporation to formulate its own rules, provided we take away from the Magna Carta the provision that Bangko Sentral is responsible. And they agreed finally. Unfortunately, we still come back with the funding problem. Who's going to fund it? The way it's going now, I got frustrated. Magbibigay doon ng 500,000 ang GSIS, bibigay doon 500 SSS, and they're still debating they will give it or not. What we requested actually was, we have CCT. And we gave, I think the latest figure I saw was 87 billion. It's not even the budget of DSWD. It is just a small project. And I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, about 10 to 15 billion of that is only for monitoring of that. And that's money given away. Why cannot we allocate similar to that, even 20% of CCT to fund initially the SB Corporation so that it will be every time we ask for fund, question asked is, where will we get it? And yet we're giving away money. The question is also, do you know that the budget of DTI, questioned before by Congressman Devenis, who's responsible? The main responsible for job creation, basically the way it looks is DTI, because they're responsible for investment, and investment translates to jobs. NEDA, because they formulate. And the least responsible is Bangko Sentral, because they have nothing to do with employment, and yet they're the one who dictates the policy on SMEs. And therefore, why cannot we allocate funds? If we can get funds to give away, we have TUPAD, we have CCT, we have PPPP, whatever. We give away money. We wanted fund for SME that can generate jobs. The success of that fund will not be collection of 97% of 95%. as the banking sector would be, but job creation. How many jobs did you create? How many jobs did you create? How many, how did you graduate from micro to micro? And that is what will be rewarded. And that is what we mean. If we are serious, let's fund that and make that on rules. You know, whenever we ask for fund, the answer will be digitalization. We will give you digitalization. That is the, as if that is the solution. It is it is a process where things can be done. It is not a solution. So whenever think of the budget of DTI, for instance, I think 5.5 billion. You add DICT, you add which DOST is not even equivalent to the monitoring fund of CCT. Are we serious that we would like to really develop SMEs? I don't think we're serious. And SMEs development is the one I think that will help us be be online with our. Thank you very much.
Just a,
Madam Chair, yes, go.
just a quick response. We do provide an annual appropriation for the Small Business Corporation. I'm still, it's 1.5 billion for how much? I'll pull out the figures, but we do provide.
Madam Chair, it's double actually
Oh,
of the
yes.
previous year, and it's full absorption and utilization.
There you go. So, nag-provide naman po ang Kongreso taon-taon ng appropriation. It's something that we do support. In fact, itong grupo na to, so Kong Kiko, Kong Tof, myself, wala pa si Kong Jeff noon kasi siya po ay nangangampanya pa noon para sa Pusong Pinoy. But during the pandemic, we were very active in pushing for Bayanihan 2. And in fact, one of the main components of Bayanihan 2 was the provision of credit for MSMEs. And we put in about 55 billion pesos. So that was the biggest component in Bayanihan 2. So we lodged it in Land Bank, TBP, and Small Business Corporation. And so, at sa totoo lang po, ang hirap po, ang napakahirap i-push ng batas na yun kasi talagang laban talaga kami sa DOF because at that time, DOF was not willing actually. But then in the end, ipasa. But you know what happened? After 1 year, we found out that the 55 billion was hardly utilized. Napakakaunting MSMEs ang nag-avail po ng utang. So, in short, while we do believe that access to credit is very important to support our MSMEs, marami din, it's multifactorial. Marami din mga bagay na kailangan din natin pagtrabahuan para tulungan talagang mapalaki ang ating MSMEs. Hindi naman pwedeng forever na lang silang micro at small. The problem kasi with our economy, it's like a kaya po donut po ang ating pinapamerienda sa inyo just to remind us that this is the Philippine economy. Parang there's a missing middle. Symbolism po yan, di ba? So, di ba, parang ang daming small, yung middle, which is the medium, yun po yung missing. Hindi sila lumalaki. Hindi sila nagiging medium. So, yun ang malaking problema talaga natin. But anyway, it's really our frustration. Even as we provide increased funds for credit for small business, paano nila i-absorb yon is also isang palaisipan. Kasi kailangan nilang kailangan din silang makapacitate para matulungan sila. Which is why naglalagay po tayo ng malaking pondo para sa 4Ps. 4Ps is our long-term poverty reduction program. It keeps our kids in school. By keeping our kids in school, that is our way to improve the productivity of our workers. So yun din ang paraan para eventually itong mga batang ito ay magiging may-ari ng mga small businesses at sana dahil nakapagtapos sila ng pag-aaral ay tumaas ang productivity nila, hopefully ay magamit nila ng mabuti at magkaroon sila ng lakas na loob na umutang. Kasi yan ang problema, di ba? Ang naging feedback po, ang dami po namin naging stakeholder consultations at that time for Bayanihan to. Ang naging feedback is, salamat, pinaparami ninyo ang perang pautang, pero paano yon? Uutang kami ngayon, magkakaroon kami ng pondo ngayon, pero paano yon? Next month, magbabayad na ulit kami. Parang napapakamot kami ng ulo. Parang, gano'n naman yun, di ba? Ibig sabihin nun, kailangan ninyong magtrabaho at palaguin ang pondo ninyo. So parang, there's a problem di ba? So kumbaga po, problema din yung pagpapataas din po ng productivity ng ating workers. So tingin ko, multifactorial. So, pero we assure you, sir, kaming lahat po dito ay hindi po natin pinapabayaan ng Small Business Corporation. Ang budget sponsor po, nandito po, kaharap natin.
Could I very quickly just interject? So I understand where you're coming from, sir. As the vice chair has been defending DTI's budget for the last 2 years, it was also something that really piqued a lot of our members insofar as, again, I go back to accountability. Who's really in charge of MSME and how much budget is being allocated for that sector, which is 99% of total registered businesses and establishments in the country. And I keep getting same questions during budget defense in the plenary, And if you look at DTI's budget allocations for MSME, whether it's through the Negosyo Center or through the shared service facilities or the Small Business Corporation or all of their, even the budget they afford to the MSME Council, which apparently is the one that coordinates supposedly all government efforts towards MSME development. It's very little, it's very minuscule, and I understand the frustration na parang, can we just look into this freaking 4-piece budget and maybe harmonize it or look at those other bigger budget pies for MSME. But the thing is, the whole of government, and we go back to this whole of government issue, caters to MSME. And when we take stock of the budgets allocated to MSME, we always look at the measly budget of DTI. And we don't look at the budget of DOLE for MSME and the DOST budget for MSME through their setup program, DOLE's Sustainable Livelihood, that's DSWD Sustainable Livelihood Program. Is that yours? DLIP is yours, and then SLP is DSWD's. Tama? And then DA also has like step and setup. TESDA, which was recently transferred to DOLE from DTI, has huge budgets for MSME. So I think we don't really have whole of government data on how much resources are being allocated to MSME. So I think that's one issue that needs to be addressed. Perhaps we can commission our CPBRD or maybe DBM, our policy unit, to take stock of really all of the MSME initiatives across the entire government bureaucracy because it's huge. But when I defend DTI's budget, I can only really say the shared service facilities and SB Corp budgets allocated. And then second, I think now it's a question on, I don't want to say forum shopping. I mean, it's okay to have a lot of forums for, a lot of fora for MSMEs na pwede nilang lapitan, diba? But it's just that with all of these government agencies offering all these support services for MSME, if you are a micro, you really wouldn't know who to approach for, yeah. And MSME Council is supposed to be that, I suppose. It's supposed to be the one synergizing all of these government efforts. But in reality, it's not because it's underfunded. Maybe attendance is not even regular. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with the work of MSME Council, but I do know that those with capacity to support are doing their own thing. And that seems to be the case with a lot of things, whether it's transport or MSME support.
And on, sorry, just to add, sir, um, obviously the problem is also quite similar. And roundtable forum like this, Constella, thank you again. I thanked you before you arrived, so I'm thanking you again now that you're here. A forum like this brings out these kinds of issues where people can start thinking about, right, the difficulties in implementing all of these things so that they are complementary. Um, as part of the Bayanihan 2 provisions of for SB Corp and for MSMEs, actually, there was a one-stop shop through Go Negosyo Centers proposal na tinulak ni Kong Stella precisely with the proviso that they transfer from the informal sector into the formal sector and get properly registered, no? To get them banked. In other words, sir, why don't you file that now as a separate bill? Kasi tapos na yung duration nung ano as a separate bill. Because you are correct. That is still a problem, no, to make sure that they get access to they get banked, right, and they get access to funding that way. Ako, I will say from my own experience, in spite of being part of that task force that tried to craft those provisions, I brought it back to my district and no one applied. No one, and I called stakeholders, I called the chambers and so on. And the office even offered to help handhold the processing with SB Corporation and so on. We called Land Bank, the local Land Bank, SB Corp and so on. And we had a number of town hall meetings on this. There was risk aversion, so no one applied. Now, part of that is partly because of the pandemic, right? There was uncertainty in terms of, okay, hindi ko nga alam kung magsasucceed pa yung negosyo ko eh. Diba? So the pandemic made long-term forecasting so difficult for them, for the micros themselves. So maybe it's time to also revisit that as well, because it's still a concern and it certainly can't hurt, right? It will only help.
If we look at the funding that is needed for lending to SME, we're talking of hundreds of billion, I think. So anything that we give to SME is token. And I know the effort that you people are doing, but we are fighting a system that is, is there any question of any applicant, lack of applicant for TUPAD? Is there any lack of applicant for CCT? The reason is it's free. It's dole out. We're not asking for dole out or SME or micro. We're asking for fund that the rules will be different from the banks. Of course, I will not go to land bank. I will not go. But if you go to SB Corporation and we use and we not give away, but maybe we will not collect 95%, maybe we'll only get 50%, but it will create jobs. The father of the student will get job because we are now creating jobs, that not dole outs. That is what we mean. If you put it in a situation outside of the normal banking rule, not giveaway, but lending, but the rules are such that they will use it for business, we will probably be successful. And we're saying just allocate about 20% to what we give away, equivalent to that, and you will see that it will create jobs, it will create employment, and you will have fathers that did not be receiving dole outs. Thank you.
I think it is difficult to make that comparison between 4Ps, CCT, conditional cash transfers, and credit programs. I think that's like an unfair comparison because those are very different programs in the sense that they have very different objectives. At pasensya na po, pero ako bilang ekonomista, parang hindi kasi po dole out ang pagtingin ko sa conditional cash transfer program dahil robust po ang evidence ng effectiveness ng conditional cash transfer programs sa pagtugis ng poverty. And maybe we can ask Dean Randy and the academics to chime in if they wish, but yan po ang dahilan kung bakit natin inintroduce dito sa Pilipinas. Hindi po natin inimbento yan. Kinuha po natin yan sa Latin America. Galing po yan sa oportunidades. I believe Mexico or Brazil. Kinuha po natin yan sa Latin America. We piloted that in 1997. The idea is to keep kids in school. And in the long run, when they graduate from school and they will eventually find a job, that is how they will exit from poverty. That's the idea. And so yun po. And then so the cash is in a way an incentive, or maybe you can think of it as a way to defray their costs. Hindi naman po libre, kahit libre po ang tuition, etc. Meron naman pong other costs like katulad ng baon ng mga bata at transportation, etc. So, yun po. So, pasensya na po, ang hindi ako sa aking pagtingin, hindi dole out yon. Kaya hindi po matatapos ang debate at palagi ko hindi ganon ang tamang pagtingin sa sa budgeting process na tataasan ba natin ng SBC at kukuhaan natin ng 4Ps. Kasi solid nga ang evidence sa 4Ps. At sa tingin ko, 4Ps will not go away. It had been institutionalized by way of a law. At so far, wala pa naman ako nakikitang intense debate dito sa Congress whether or not it should be removed. So tingin ko, we should maybe dalhin na lang natin sa iba. But we noted po na pag-iisipan po natin anong mga iba't ibang paraan para pataasin pa ang budget ng SBC. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Comment lang. I'm not against Tupad. I'm not against. I believe in that. I only am saying if we can allocate that fund, why cannot we allocate a little amount similar to that so that we can give the father a job that you don't have to give them support. That's what I mean. I am not against those things.
Yeah.
I know they're necessary and people are relying on it. But I'm just saying that why cannot we allocate some more fund for
Yeah.
SMEs lending that we will not be very strict on the conditions like the bank. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, Madam Chair, very quickly, like I know there's anecdotal evidence of 4Ps beneficiaries being, tong its players and mariteses at home and not being productive. So of course there are those 4Ps beneficiaries, but there's also 4Ps beneficiaries that are able to leverage on the CCT for greater productivity for themselves and their families. And so I'm curious, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, about the conditionalities in the CCT at the moment. I know definitely there's an education conditionality involved to keep kids in schools. But I was wondering if it's possible to revisit the conditionalities of 4Ps to maybe include something that would make them more productive in terms of like being an MSME, you leveraging on the 4Ps not only for educational assistance for the son, daughter studying, but also maybe leverage that to start up a business, formalizing the economy, join the MSME sector, join the 99.5%. I think that might make them not only responsible to their children insofar as schooling is concerned, but also responsible to their children insofar as having sustainability, livelihood, income, so that they're able to live beautifully. Beautifully talaga. Okay, thank you. Yun lang po. Let's revisit the conditionalities of 4Ps towards productivity and perhaps empowering the MSME sector.
Thank you. It's already 12:30, and the registration for, ay, sir, Kong Nisay.
Kong, oo. I'm Kong Jet Nisay, party list representative from Bataan. So yung Bataan naman po is a peninsula. Connected naman kami sa Pampanga. Pero gusto ko lang idiin yung sinabi ni Kong Top kanina na paano natin ma-ensure yung job opportunities through academe and linkages. Kasi last week kausap namin yung DepEd. Bisita ho natin, kasama natin. Pinupush natin na walang estudyante na ma-left behind. Kaya nga, hindi lang sa Bataan, sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas, lalong-lalo na ho, yung mga hindi pa progresibong mga island natin, pinipilit natin magkaroon ng integrated school. So, hindi lang ho integrated, kahit na ho high school, kung kaya ng kolehiyo, bakit hindi? Kasi ho, yung mga gastusin nila araw-araw, sa halip na mapunta sa pangkain, napupunta ho sa mga pamasahe lang. So ang Bataan ho ay nung nasa city pa ho ako, meron ho kaming 60,000 students. Kasi ho ang Balanga City yung sentro ng edukasyon sa Bataan, pero meron ho kaming Freeport area of Bataan, ito ho yung APAB. Meron ho kami ditong 60,000, 45,000 na workers. So karamihan ho dito siguro, hindi ko ho alam kung baka 30 to 40% ito ho ay mga nag-migrate na sa iba't ibang parte ho ng Pilipinas. Pero base ho, nung nandun ako sa city, talaga hong number one ho na problema talaga yung mga graduate natin sa kolehiyo. So, walang trabaho. At every year, katulad nga ho na sinabi ni Kong Stella kanina, every year push tayo ng push sa DepEd, sa CHED, na maalagaan yung edukasyon. Pero hindi ho natin namamalayan na every year, padami ho ng padami yung mga graduates ho natin. Na yun ho yung pupunta sa iba't ibang bansa at kadalasan kung sino yung may pinakamaunlad na rehiyon, pupunta ho doon, nagkakaproblema ho yung kanilang mga pamilya dahil nahihiwalay. So hindi ko ho alam kung sino ho yung tamang ahensya ngayon na kailangan nang buuin po ito para ho naman maibsan yung problema natin pagdating ho sa trabaho ng mga graduates ho natin.
Meron bang official policy position
Oo.
ng gobyerno tungkol sa OFWs? Meaning, pinupush ba yan? Meaning,
Oo.
ano bang
Yun ho, katulad doon ng sa OFW natin, di ba ho? Last week lang, napag-usapan din natin yung mga teachers natin, kung sino pa yung mga asset, sila pa yung umaalis. So, siguro ho, kung baka may mga resource person ho tayo dito na makakapagbigay ng input at makatulong ho. Dito ho sa Kongreso, kami naman ho ay open para ho din ho makatulong ho sa pag-grab ho ng House Bill. Maraming salamat ho.
May sasagot? Ma'am Grace, sasagot kayo? Kasi ano ho yan the other side of it is, sorry lang, just to interrupt. The question, as far as I can tell, is the lack of some kind of centralized industrialization policy. So you don't know which sectors or industries you necessarily wish to incentivize in terms of growth. Therefore, when you do a job skills mismatch accounting, whether it's through TESDA or the interagency councils, no ma'am, between academe and industry, kulang ho yung tracking ng matching kung wala rin namang growth dun sa industry side.
Thank you po, Kong Jet. Exactly, tama po kayo, it's DOLE's role. Employment facilitation is a mandate of the DOLE. So we do help facilitate employment through our, of course, regional and field offices, and of course in partnership with the LGU PESOS, Public Employment Service Offices. So the PESOS actually also do reach out to job placement offices in schools and universities, or be it private or public. So the arrangement po dyan is they could enter into a memorandum of understanding with the respective regional office, and then they would help, parang the JPO or the job placement office in the school would serve as the local peso of the school in the locality. So in that way po, there's the aspect of the supply from the school, and then the JPO would partner with the DOLE, and then DOLE could provide the available vacancies gathered from the area. So dun po pwedeng mangyari yung matching. The concern now, sir, is since the labor market is so complex, the available skills that we produce are not the ones needed by the industries in the specific areas. So like for example po, if the region for 4A, for example, is more of really on manufacturing and all that, but still we do have graduates na marami rin po na different industries. So the tendency is really to look outside the area, and that's where the mismatch happens. Sometimes even if the credential is this, kasi pag sa skills matching po, it's always like there's the education aspect. But if the job that they get is not equivalent or related to what, uh, it's really a complex story po, sir. So that's really one thing that we would like to, I'm looking at PIDS also. It's really one thing that we would, the Philippines is not alone in that case naman po, in that manner. That's an international concern. But we do have our own small steps towards achieving the same goal. But towards employment facilitation, we have various partners, not only the government or not only DOLE and the PESO and the LGUs. There's active mobilization of the industries in the respective areas, sir. So RO3 is very much active naman din po in that sense, and I'm sure our regional director would be very much willing to help in that manner po.
Since this is a labor forum, can we close with just one practical question for Ma'am Grace? This happens to me every day, multiple times, on every day talaga. And I'm sure it happens to all the Kongs here. Tinatanong ito sa akin every day, multiple times. Kong Stella, kailangan ko ng trabaho. Meron bang opening sa opisina mo? Siyempre, wala. Kasi 5 lang naman ang position sa bawat opisina namin. So, Ma'am Grace, ano ang payo nyo sa amin? Ano dapat ang sagot namin sa kanila?
Thank you, ma'am, for bringing that up. We, as mentioned earlier po, we are really strengthening, revitalizing our labor market
Anong
information.
isasagot namin dun sa tao?
Pwede po silang pumunta sa philjobnet.gov.ph. We have strengthened our job portal. That's the official government job portal. We continue to invite more employers to post their vacancies. We are also trying to have the different government agencies to also post their government.
Right now po, ilan po ang job openings?
Let me get the data, ma'am. Pero last year, a total of 2 million vacancies po ang meron po doon sa website. So, we continue to boost that po. But, yes, ma'am. And in fact, we have initial discussions with ECOP din po on PISAC on how we could leverage on field sa ating mga NCs.
Mr. Chair, very quickly, I know you have to wrap up. So there was mention of from one of our resource persons earlier. Is there like a roadmap for like skills? There is the Philippine Skills Framework, right? How many jobs are sort of articulated there or covered by the PSF?
The PSFs po are actually, I think there are only 7. That
7
is
jobs?
no, 7
Sectors.
sectors that are covered. So,
Okay, so that's one.
will-
And then two, is there an effort to add to that to cover the whole
yeah, that's
job
the vision, sir.
sector?
But again, there's a corresponding cost per sector to develop a skills framework.
So, is that part of your 2024 program as funded by the 2024 GAA?
Honestly, it's not, sir. We are actually looking more into our
Sino
technical
ba
assistance.
nagpa-fund? Sino bang kaniyong program yan? Is that DTI or
It's
DOLE?
DTI-led po, sir,
Ah,
the
it's DTI
PSF.
led.
So, and then the development of the PSFs is industry-led. So, for example, what's ongoing now is for IT-BPM. So, IBPAP has actually committed some resources towards the development of the PSF.
Mm.
So, that's why when I mentioned the green skills or the green sector PSF, we are actually looking at our partners, whether it's World Bank or ILO, or which would be willing to help fund for the development of the PSF. Because the PSF is really holistic, like from whether it's vertical or horizontal, and then up to the jobs and levels, and then the skills needed required, and then the end goal naman po is for it to advise curriculum development or updating, aligning with the industry needs. Because since it's industry-led, it really already indicates what's needed now and and maybe the school and the curriculum could align what they are offering as to what the industry needs po.
You should be the one telling the schools and the families as
Yes
well.
po, ma'am.
Please.
We actually advocate po the use of
Oo.
PSF in our career development, we call it career guidance advocacy program before, but
Yes,
that's
and
also part of
please,
labor market
please
information.
pakisabi na lang po sa ating mga kababayan, sa mga pamilya, kung ano yung mga kurso na dapat kunin ng mga anak nila, 'di ba? Kasi
Yes.
apply sila ng apply sa mga degrees na in the end, wala palang mag-hire sa kanila. Yun ang nangyayari po. So in the end, 2 million jobs, 2 million openings, walang takers kasi walang makakapag-comply doon sa mga eligibility requirements. So yun lang po. And we hope po na come August when budget hearings begin, sana po yung 2 million job openings na yan ay maging 500,000 na lang. Ganun na lang po. Or maging zero.
Yes po, that's part of our labor market information advocacy po, which actually at the moment we have training of trainers for our regional implementers for this week. So we really try to boost the capacity of our implementers po at the local level.
And so we advocate for the passage of our measure, transforming the peso to the piso. Para the additional E is for entrepreneurship. Yeah, so para meron sa LGU level, which will support also our ECOP. Thank you.
Thank you. And this has been, I think, a very intense and fruitful discussion. Ang dami-daming sinanga ng dalawang study. They were very clear and specific as to what the constraint of the studies were. And 80% of what was discussed is outside the scope of the two studies presented today. We have ranged from removing minimum wage to discussing foreign direct investments and Human Development Index. But thank you to our researchers for taking part. Thank you to everybody present today. Magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we finally close, may we call on our speakers, our panelists, and our guests for the most important part of the program, which is the photo op. So may we invite our speakers here in front. Okay. That side, please. Dito na lang po na side. Dito.
Hi po. Yung iba po pwede po mag-seat po ulit sa kanilang mga seats po. So the others po can stand in the back. Yes po. Yes, ma'am.
May we request our House members to occupy the seats, please?
Hello? Excuse me, I think everybody is in the room. We will start in 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. Again, let me greet everyone a pleasant afternoon and welcome to this roundtable discussion on scorecards for livable and sustainable communities. I am Jeb Keta from CPBRD, and I will be your host for this event. Today's roundtable discussion is the fifth among the series of RTDs in support to the evidence-based project organized by the Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department in partnership with the Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development. The last set of RTDs will be on Monday next week, February 12, if I'm not mistaken, and you're all welcome to attend that event also. Before I proceed, let me recognize the present of our esteemed House members who are with us today. First is Congressman Christopher De Venecia, Congressman Adrian Michael Amatong, Congresswoman Stella Kimbo, and Congresswoman Ana Victoria Veloso Tuason. Moving on and to officially start the program, let me call on the Deputy Secretary General of CPBRD, Dr. Romulo Emmanuel Miral Jr. for the opening remarks. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department and of the House of Representatives and the Ateneo Center for Research and Development, let me welcome everyone to this roundtable discussion. This afternoon's roundtable discussion will delve into the challenges experienced by LGUs in implementing and monitoring environmental laws and assessing their sustainability performance. The Congressional Research Fellows will introduce and explain the use of the Blue and Green Economy Scorecard, its importance to policymakers, and other advantages that it may provide towards achieving the goal of livable and sustainable cities. Um, and for that, we are very grateful to the authors of this study, namely Dr. Jefferson Arapok, Dr. Asa Jose Sahise, and Dr. Sharina Lynn Amedo Ripolio. And of course, we are very grateful to our partner institution, the CERD, led by Dr. Maha Lea Rabago, and the moving force behind this partnership, Congresswoman Stella Kimbo. We would also like to thank the our panelists who will be sharing with us their valuable time. Um, Mr. John Eric Abilino from the Department of Environment and Natural Resource, Dr. Laura T. David of the Marine Science Institute of the University of the Philippines, and Dr. Divina Gracia Del Prado of the Philippine Statistical Authority, and Dr. Jem Castillo, President of the Resources, Environment, and Economic Center for Studies. So again, without much ado, I'll hand the floor to our presenters.
Thank you, Dr. M, for the opening remarks, giving us a snapshot on the topic at hand, the environmental challenges and sustainability issues that we need to address now, in the hope of providing a better place for future generations. Before we proceed, let me recognize the presence of Congressman Francisco Benitez. Good afternoon, sir. So for the presentation of the study, let me introduce first the three CRFs. I think they will be presenting sections of the slides separately. First is Dr. Jefferson Arapok. Dr. Jeff is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Newcastle. Dr. Arapok is a research fellow at the Center for Behavioral Economics, Society and Technology, and has extensive experience contributing to different research institutions and consulting for different government agencies. His research focuses on behavioral economics with interest in nudging and prosocial behavior. He is also a co-founder and managing editor of Usapang Econ, an advocacy project promoting accessible economics education. The second CRF is Dr. Charina Lynn Amedo Ripolio. Dr. Cha is an assistant professor and deputy director for research and development of the Marine Science Institute, UP Diliman. She is a physical oceanographer with research interests on climate change, coastal and island circulation, remote sensing, air-sea interactions, mesoscale dynamics, hydrodynamic, and dispersal modeling. She's been with the UP MSI for almost 15 years and has been involved in several projects, studying the waters around and within the Philippines. In addition to her role in the university, she's been sitting as a member of technical working groups providing expertise to several government agencies. Dr. earned a PhD in oceanography from University of Hawaii in Manoa, where she received the United States Philippines Oceanography Graduate Fellowship of the East-West Center. She received her degree in fisheries at UP Visayas, followed by a master's degree in marine science at UP MSI. The third CRF is Dr. Asa Jose Sahise. Dr. Asa is a professor at the Department of Economics at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, where has been teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in microeconomic theory and environmental economics since 2003. He is also part of the executive committee and a co-regional director for Luzon of the Economy and Environment Group Philippines. He has worked on a variety of environmental economic issues, which include, among others, payment for ecosystem services, impact evaluation of community ground irrigation, climate change adaptation in coastal areas, and applications of different economic valuation methodologies on ecotourism, sanitation, agrobiodiversity, and forest conservation. He obtained his bachelor's degree in economics from UPLB and his master's and doctorate degree in agriculture and natural resource economics from the University of California, Berkeley. So I'll give the floor to the CRF for their presentation. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Sir Jeff Queta. So, magandang hapon po sa lahat. So, I am Charina Lynn Repolo, So together with me is Dr. Asa Sahise, Dr. Jeff Arapok, Ms. Alisa Mercado, our research assistant. And for this afternoon, we will be presenting our study entitled Scorecards for Livable and Sustainable Communities. So before I proceed, let me allow you to introduce to you, a brief background and underlying motivation for this research. So as you can see in the picture, so Philippines is in the hotspot in terms of endemism. So 2/3 of our planet's biodiversity are within the borders of our country. And it serves, as a critical hub for various economic activities reliant to these diverse ecosystems. This activity spans crucial sectors, for example, for food production, manufacturing, energy generation, and tourism. Despite these remarkable attributes of the country, however, we face significant challenges in global environmental sustainability rankings. So for instance, as you can see here, according to the Environmental Performance Index released by the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy, the Philippines, went down to 158 place, globally. So this is a global index. This decline from 111th place in 2020 can be attributed into these two indicators. One is the deteriorating air quality and inadequate efforts in climate change mitigation, which are also evident in the aforementioned ranking. In addition to our concerning performance in terms of global rankings, our environment also faces numerous threats. One significant example is the distressing frequency of oil spills. So we had that last year. According to records from the Philippine National Coast Guard, there have been 468 oil spills incident in the last 23 years, starting 2000 to 2023. And with that, 40.8% of this occurring in just the past decade. So the catastrophic of these incidents on affected communities, of course, is undeniable. Further, the Philippines ranked 9 out of 250 countries for having the highest number of endangered species, as reported by the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List. These alarming statistics underscores the urgent need for conservation efforts to protect our biodiversity. Moreover, the Philippines also holds, unfortunately, the title of being the world's top contributor to plastic pollution in the oceans. So a study conducted by Utility Bidder, an independent organization based in United Kingdom, revealed that the average person in the Philippines contributes to 3.3 kilograms of plastic pollution per year. This problem, need to be addressed. However, there's a bigger issues that often gets into the way of finding the right policy situations. One major problem is the lack of consistent data collection, or sometimes no data at all being collected. Take our experience with oil spills recently, for example. When data is not collected beforehand, it's tough to evaluate the full extent of the oil spill's impact after it happens. We need baseline information to evaluate and respond to this situation properly. And this require constant data collection and regular monitoring. Further, there's also a governance issue regarding which authority should be responsible for collecting those information, and that lack of coordination in data collection complicates evidence-based policymaking more than necessary. So considering these challenges, our research team suggested to create an index that our leaders can utilize to actively promote the government's initiative of fostering a sustainable blue and green economy. So we're calling this initiative the Blue and Green Economy Scorecard for livable and sustainable communities. However, the development of indices to gauge environmental quality is not a novel concept. In fact, as you can see here, numerous countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, New Zealand, and even Portugal have implemented such indices to visualize and assess the impact of environmental conditions on people's quality of life. And research has indicated that low scores from these environmental quality indices have been linked to increased mortality rates, independent of age, gender, and other socio-economic factors. So let me cite, some examples. So in the Philippines, what environmental metric systems we have. So I just, presenting here to you some of the example. So although often tailored, this different metric system to specific industries or in a limited scope. For instance, we have what we call the Fishery Compliance Audit, the FISCA, so which monitors the adherence of local government units to Republic Act number 8550, also known as the Philippine Fisheries Code, as amended by Republic Act number 10654. Additionally, one example, there's also the Marine Protected Area Management Assessment Tool. So this tool is designed to evaluate the management of marine protected areas. And furthermore, we have the Development Academy of the Philippines is currently piloting the adoption of this Smart City Index, which aimed at assisting cities in creating smart city roadmaps. Presently, only 2 cities, which is Santa Rosa City and Malolos City, have participated in this initiative. So let me show you, the data from the FISCA audit. So this was the report, the recent report they had from 2022. And you can see here in the graph the significant increase in the last 4 years. So as you can see here, in the bottom right here, it accounts for 96.13% of the total coastal LGUs in the country as being compliant or submitting the FISCA report to the DILG. And now DILG targets to have 100% submission rate for LGU for 2023 in order to have a substantial overview of fisheries management at the local level for more responsive policies and programs. So notable improvements in the compliance of LGUs can be observed from 2018 to 2023. However, gaps has been identified based on this recent 2022 result. And this is shown here in the graph below in blue, wherein delineating municipal waters, there are still a total of 42.69% still have not demarcated their municipal water boundaries, which can, of course, result to encroachment, overfishing, and improper management of coastal resources. For the meat on the right side, in most cases, LGUs that do or fill up the form meet often have support from previous or current development partners such as NGOs and projects. However, challenges has been identified and faced by LGUs, and these challenges are first, awareness. Some LGU lack knowledge about the existence of meat practices. Next is capacity. There are many limitations in the number of individuals within LGUs who are adequately trained to meet this form effectively. That's why it is a necessity to have like a training of trainers program. So you can see here, this map here shows the coastal communities that have submitted their meat reports, and this is voluntary in comparison to FISCA, which is being compulsory for all LGUs. And next also is challenge on data management. So LGUs encounter difficulties in effectively managing the data collected during the meet activities. So database between, in each LGU, there's difficulty on establishing that database um, uh, in their units. And lastly is the application of the results. So even when meet is conducted, there are challenges in how to translate the results, into actionable insight for planning purposes, particularly in the context of adjusting their management strategies for the marine protected areas. So given these challenges, I just point out or highlight some of the initiatives we have on the ground. If this does not represent all, but I just have to present to you some of the initiatives that we have so far. So as you can see here, there are several, metric tools, forms to assess, the management of the marine protected areas. And as you can see here, there's what they call the MPA fish map. So this is to address challenges for capacitating our LGUs. So this fish map is an app in a mobile phone wherein even Bantay Dagat without proper education on how to identify fish can easily use the map for them to be able to gather data, identify fish on their localities. And the MPA support network, which houses the meat forms, the result of the meat forms. So we have the database for that housed at Marine Science Institute. And as you can see, it also collects all this data from all these forms. And another initiative is the establishment of the Professional Masters in Tropical Marine Ecosystem Management in partnership with DNR. So this Professional Masters is aiming, to capacitate our DNR or national government agencies, specifically the DNR. And now we are expanding to capacitate also the LGU in partnership with our NGO partners. So with this, so we can see, that we need a more comprehensive and a more harmonized scorecards that would aid our lawmakers, local government units, and other agencies in directing support and crafting the policy, tailored to achieve our country's sustainability goals. And now, Dr. Jeff Arapok will walk you through our proposed scorecards for this research study. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc Cha. Good afternoon, everyone. So to depart from existing metrics that may appear overly tailored to specific industries and limited in scope, so this study um, adapts the sustainability framework proposed by the European Climate, Infrastructure, and Environment Executive Agency, also known as SINEA. So this framework encompasses four primary sustainability dimensions, including environmental, economic, social, and sustainable governance. So, although initially this framework was crafted for the blue economy, so this study aims to expand its applicability to encompass indicators relevant to sectors within the green economy as well. So in calculating the blue and green scorecards, of course, several steps were undertaken. So for the selection of indicators, so relevant indicators were chosen to address various environmental and sustainability issues. So potential indicators were drawn from established international and local scorecards, so including but not limited to SINEA scorecards, Smart City Index, the Global Smart City Index, Sustainable Cities Index, the MPA Meet, and the FishCap. Then for the data collection, data primarily sourced from secondary sources were gathered, supplemented by primary data collected at the local government level. So within this phase, emphasis was placed on identifying pertinent and suitable metrics for the selected indicators. And then for the weighting of indicators, the research team determined the weights for each indicator. So we base it, I think, is it in the SINEA framework, right? Okay. So anyway, let me walk you through the dimensions. So for the environmental dimension, we divided the indicators into two groups. So the green and the blue economy indicators. So for the green economy indicators, for green economy indicators were applied to landlocked communities, while green economy indicators were added to coastal communities. And for the green economy indicators, this include the following indicators. So there's air emission, impact on ecosystem, a level of energy consumption, waste management. And then for blue indicators, so this include the following indicators here. And then for the economic dimension, the indicators include the concentration of business, economic viability, employment indicators, and these indicators assess the economic capacity to sustainably support economic resiliency and sustainability goals. And then for the social dimension, the indicators include employment conditions, safety management, vulnerability indicators. So these indicators focus on community resiliency in cases of emergency or disaster. And then for the sustainable governance dimension, the indicators include the ease of doing business, impact assessment programs of LGUs, climate change initiatives, and of course, budget utilization indicators. So these indicators measure governance practices and performance. So our team has chosen to conduct a pilot test, okay, of the blue and green scorecards with LGUs that possess the most readily available data corresponding to the indicators that we have identified. And so here's the result of that exercise. So what insights can we get from this exercise? So we noticed that leading LGUs demonstrate excellence in both environmental and economic dimensions. However, despite their high scores in these areas, Baguio City and Davao City face challenge in the governance dimension. On the other hand, such cities such as Iligan, Zamboanga, and Parañaque have scored lower across all dimensions. So notably, but this is the caveat, data for the blue economy scorecards are usually not available. And so, however, the primary challenge we faced during the implementation of this pilot testing was the varying capacity of LGUs to collect data. We all know that information is power, and having accurate data is crucial in guiding us toward the right policy direction to address these challenges. And I would like to emphasize several key observations derived from our pilot exercise regarding data collection. We've observed that while most LGU acknowledge the importance of collecting this data, there's confusion regarding the jurisdiction of responsibility for its collection. So should it be the LGU, the DENR, or the PSA? So additionally, the lack of harmonization in data collection often leads to inconsistencies of data or data duplication or even the absence of data collection altogether. So our team strongly believes that addressing this issue is very important for the success of this proposal. So I will now give the mic to Dr. Sahise.
Let me just wind down the. Okay, so how will this blue and green scorecards help our LGUs? Basically, it will help them in three aspects: compliance monitoring, policy formulation, and policy implementation. In terms of compliance, it can enhance compliance and enforcement. In particular, scorecards can be used to set clear and measurable environmental targets, which can be linked to existing regulations and enforcement mechanisms. It can enhance and improve accountability and transparency. Publicly available scorecards can hold government agencies, businesses, other entities accountable for their environmental performance and therefore fostering greater transparency. What the scorecards will help us is we move from looking at outputs of our legislation and policy and moving towards measuring outcomes of these legislations and policies. So in terms of formulation, it can lead to data-driven decision making. A national scorecard system would provide standardized data across various sectors and regions, ensuring comparability and informing the development of more effective and targeted both national and local environmental policies. It can also facilitate stakeholder engagement. Publicly available data empowers citizens, communities, NGOs to hold polluters accountable and advocate for improved environmental outcomes. In terms of implementation, it can be a guide for prioritization and resource allocation by highlighting areas where performance is lagging. Scorecards can help policymakers prioritize their efforts and allocate resources more effectively. It can also promote interregional competition. Benchmarking between regions based on a common metrics can foster a healthy competition, driving improvements in environmental performance across the country. It can also encourage best practices by linking the scorecards to existing successful environmental initiatives can lead to showcasing successful environmental initiatives and can encourage others to adopt best practices and accelerate progress towards meeting our sustainable development goals. And lastly, it can also be a way towards attracting responsible investment. A robust scorecard system can actually demonstrate the Philippines' commitment to environmental sustainability, attracting responsible investors and businesses. So let me just go to the last. But the scorecard that we have is far from perfect right now. I think it needs a vetting, especially at the local level, local government. These are all based on literature, but there will be an issue of what can be measured versus what should be measured. So I think right now, from what we have, we need to identify further and finalize the indicators and collect and update available baseline data. We also need to look at which scorecard will be applicable, green versus blue. And for that, we need to look at classification of landlocked versus coastal and those issues. And perhaps, and this is the last, would be thinking of possibly legislating data collection for continuity of these scorecards as well. So with that, I think I end the group's presentation, and thank you for listening through. Thank you.
Thank you, CRFs, for the well-outlined presentation, comprehensively identifying key environmental issues and introducing the Blue and Green Economy Scorecards and its importance to local government units in pursuing their sustainability goals. For the panel discussion, I will introduce the 4 reactors before they proceed. So first reactor is Mr. John Eric Avellino. Mr. Avellino is the Chief of the Integrated Coastal and Marine Partnership Section of the Biodiversity Management Bureau of DNR. He finished his Bachelor's of Science degree in Development Communication at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and his Master's of Science in Sustainability Science at the University of Tokyo. He entered the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in 2009 and has since worked on the field of coastal and marine resource management. He also served as a focal to multiple multilateral environmental partnerships, such as the Coral Triangle Initiative and the coordinating body on the seas of the East Asia Working Group on Marine and Coastal Environment, among others. He is currently facilitating the implementation of the components of the DNR Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program, including the biodiversity-friendly enterprises and the integrated coastal management. So for our second panelist is Yusek Divina Gracia del Prado. She is the Deputy National Statistician of Sectoral Statistics Office of PSA. This office provides a technical support to the PSA in the areas of agriculture, natural resources, agrarian reform, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, electricity, gas, water, energy, construction, foreign and domestic trade services, science and technology, finance, investment, population, woman, and gender. It also provides technical staff support to the PSA in generating the national accounts and the development and maintenance of economic and social account. She was the Assistant National Statistician of Economic Sectors Statistics Service prior to her designation as OIC of SSO and the former Director of Statistical Methodology Unit. She is a graduate of PhD in Statistics from the University of the Philippines School of Stat, Diliman, and Master in Applied Statistics from the Catholic University Leuven in Belgium. Our third reactor is Dr. Laura David. She is a professor of oceanography in the University of the Philippines. She makes use of remote sensing and modeling to explore how ocean physics influence the distribution and state of ocean flora and fauna. She is recognized as one of the country's pioneers in ocean remote sensing, with her expertise being tapped to assist in matters related to climate change, vulnerability, and adaptation. Currently, she is also the director of the UP Marine Science Institute, chair of the CHED Technical Committee in Marine Science, board member of the Outstanding Women in Nation Service, Inc., and board president of PAT Foundation and TAO Pilipinas, a woman-led nonprofit NGO of technical professionals who help guide housing issues in urban and rural areas. Internationally, she is also an emeritus of the Scientific Steering Committee of the Geo Blue Planet, an academy member of Future Earth Coast. Both organizations are committed to people-relevant ocean science. For our fourth reactor, Dr. Jem Castillo. Dr. Jem is the National Director of Economy and Environment Group Philippines, affiliated with the Economy and Environment Partnership in Southeast Asia. He served as the President of the Resources and Environmental Economics Foundation of the Philippines and holds the role of President and CEO at Resources, Economics, and Environment Center for Studies. Dr. Jem is an expert in natural resource and environmental economics with notable contributions in wealth accounting, ecosystem service valuation, environmental governance, forest land use planning, coastal resource management, and payment for environmental services. He played a crucial role in piloting World Bank's Wealth Accounting and Valuation Ecosystem Services Program and led the Philippine country study for the UN Environment Program's The Economic of Ecosystem and Biodiversity Initiative. Dr. Jem earned degrees in forestry and forest resource management from UP Los Baños and a doctorate in forest economics, along with certificate in resource economics from the Michigan State University. His distinguished leadership and expertise solidify his prominent position in the field of environmental economics and resource management. So with that, let me call on the first reactor, Mr. John Eric Avellino.
Good afternoon, everyone. And firstly po, magandang hapon po. Isang makalikasang hapon po sa lahat. And thank you for inviting us, Her Excellencies. So thank you for inviting the DNR to be part of the panelists for this roundtable discussion po. Personally, this topic is very interesting as I've also done my research on sustainability evaluation, but particularly lang po on marine protected areas. I can say that finding or shortlisting yung indicators may be the toughest part in this research, as we have been used to looking at a number of indicators as well in the three different pillars of sustainability, yung economics, environment, and governance, much more aggregating them into one metric. Nevertheless, on behalf of the department po, I can say confidently that the Honorable Secretary Loizaga will be very supportive of this research. Basically, it provides the necessary information that will holistically measure the sustainability of our local government units. Secretary Loizaga has always emphasized the value of being science-based in all of our initiatives, and having this framework will fully support her directives. Allow me to share some of the initiatives of the department that are also aligned with this initiative. In terms of data harmonization, first is on blue economy. The department has supported the development of this bill and has attended as resource speakers in previous hearings po nito. In addition to this, the department is currently on the process of updating the national state of the coast with focus on blue economy as its framework, convening the different national government agencies and updating our baselines from our 2018 report. In terms of the data gaps, recently, with the approval of the budget of the department po, it will be establishing 5 new marine research stations across the country and 2 partner stations. This research stations aims to serve as knowledge hubs for ocean science for impactful actions. So this one may be able to address the issue on the data gaps that was presented earlier. In terms of having governance as one of the issues for having lower scores from its initial implementation ng scorecard, I would like to highlight as well the flagship program of the department on its coastal and marine resources. As mentioned by Doc Cha earlier, the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program, wherein in this program, one of its components is on technical assistance, where we provide support to the local government units in adopting the integrated coastal management as an approach. No? And just recently, a bill on ICM has been passed on its 3rd reading, and we are very thankful for the leadership of Honorable Chato and, of course, Honorable Ana Veloso, who is with us today, who has been very instrumental in the swift passage of this bill. This bill addressed the issue of the LGUs of having to prepare more than 30 plus sectoral plans, wherein some of which has not been translated into action. So yung mainstreaming approach for the ICM was the strategy of the department to make sure that ridge to reef approach will be adopted by our local government units. This initiative supports our mainstreaming of the ridge to reef approach, as mentioned. So overall po, this sustainability index will be very helpful for the department moving forward. As mentioned by Doc Cha, we have been implementing monitoring tools from the department, yung mga MPA tools, and even City Biodiversity Index also, we have that for the urban areas. Hopefully, those can be looked at as well in finalizing the indicators for this research. But overall, in order to see the impact of these tools, this blue and green scorecard, a sustainability scorecard, will help us see the impacts of our initiative, not just as individual sectors, but in totality. So muli, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. John Eric Avellino, for your valuable inputs and for giving us updates on DNR's ongoing initiative for coastal management. So for our next reactor, may I call on Yusek Divina Gracia del Prado of PSA. ASEC.
So good afternoon to our honorable congressmen, to the authors of this very valuable undertaking, and to everyone. So in behalf of Undersecretary Dennis Mapa, I would like to express our gratitude to the Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department of the House of Representatives and to the Ateneo Center of Economic Research and Development for inviting the Philippine Statistics Authority in this roundtable discussion on the scorecards for livable and sustainable communities. So I would like also to congratulate the authors for coming up with this standardized tool that can be used by the local government units in monitoring their performance. Okay, so in the tool, there are four dimensions that are considered, and these are environment, economic, social, and governance. And I think these dimensions are the areas that are important to measure for the overall performance of the local government units. So, but I will present my comments and some recommendations on the selected indicators and also on the methodology for scoring. So I would like to start with my comments on the indicators. So since this is a tool that standardizes the scoring system to measure performances of the LGUs, I think it is important that we have the same basis for measurement, which includes availability of data for all selected indicators in all LGUs so that their scores are comparable. I saw in the report that the performance of the selected areas were compared for the pilot areas. So it's important that their performances are measured using the same yardstick. But I know that this is a current challenge which is also presented to us by by the authors, because I see also that there are pilot areas with no indicators. So this limitation was also emphasized in the paper. Second, another comment is on the frequency of data updates. So frequency of data updating should be consistent with the frequency of rating using the scorecards. I did not read in the paper the frequency of rating, if it is annual or once in 2 years or once in 5 years. So if the rating is done annually, then indicators should also be available annually, except for those that are not volatile or dynamic, so they are not changing often. But again, frequency of data availability is another challenge. Another is indicator should be relevant or is a good measurement for the category that is being measured. So under the governance, there is a category on corruption. And I see that the proxy indicator here that measures presence of corruption is LGU budget utilization. And as explained in the paper, low BUR or budget utilization rate may indicate presence of corruption. But this may give a wrong signal because it is not a definite indicator of corruption. Pwede rin kasing mataas yung BUR niya pero may nangyayaring corruption. Okay. Indicator can fairly discriminate or differentiate the LGUs, whether one is more privileged or underprivileged than the others. For example, in the economic dimension, meron tayong indicator na average household income. Yeah, it is one of the indicators to measure economic viability. But there are areas where average household or family income are low, but prices of goods and services are generally low in the area. And meron ding areas na mataas yung average household or family income, pero ang prices of goods and services naman ay mataas. So under social, there is also a category on employment, and one of the indicators is average wage of employees compared to national averages. That's one of the indicators. My comment here is the different minimum wage per region set by the regional tripartite wages and productivity boards. So most likely, regions with low minimum wage rate will also have low average wage of employees. On the methodology for scoring, I saw that for every indicator, there is a unit of measure. Some are in percent, some in levels. However, there are some indicators where the unit of measure is not clear. For example, for the average wage of employees compared to national average, which is under social dimension, the unit of measure is not clear. So in the paper, it says it's peso per year, but I don't know if we are interested on the peso difference between the average wage of employee to the national average or the ratio. For the formula on normalization, the normalization as mentioned in the paper will convert the scores into values that are, sorry, I think I'm not changing the slides. Sorry. So, okay, so the normalization as mentioned in the paper will convert the scores into values that are between 0 and 1. This makes the perfect score of its dimension equal to the number of indicators for the dimension. So if there are 5 indicators in the dimension, the perfect score will be 5. However, given the normalization formula, it may not give normalized values that are between 0 and 1. Why? This could happen when the benchmark value is already lower than the lowest value. So you will be getting a negative result. Since we want LGUs to be improving, the lowest value may exceed the benchmark value. And it could also be higher than the actual value for the LGU. So kung mas mataas na yung actual value no than the benchmark value, the normalized value is greater than 1. So it's not really sure that you will get 0 and 1. So you will have a problem there in aggregating the scores. Next, on environmental dimension, yeah, in terms of weights. So it's 60% for the environment, the rest are divided among the 3 dimensions. However, it's not clear in the paper what are the weights of each indicator within the dimension. Is it equally distributed as well? So that's one of the things that we need to look at. Kasi importante rin po yung weights for each indicator. And then for the aggregation, it's not also mentioned in the paper how we aggregated the score. So after weighing, after normalizing, what is the next step? Is it the weighing first? Or we weigh first before normalizing and then we aggregate? So it's not very clear. So I go to my recommendations. Okay. So there should be a metadata for all indicators. This contains the description of the indicator, what is being measured and how it is measured. So this is to provide common understanding to the indicator that is being measured. So for example, there is an indicator on the percentage of city land area covered by tree canopy. Is the area covered by a park with trees considered as covered by tree canopy? So there should be a clear description of this of its indicator. So the metadata will help. I have recommendation as for the indicators. For some indicators, for example, for average household income, it can be replaced by poverty incidence. Poverty incidence is the proportion of families or population who are considered poor. The identification of poor is based on the poverty threshold within the area. So we have poverty incidence up to the city municipality level. So the PSA has it. And then for LGU budget utilization, I don't know if there is also a COA or auditing for LGUs. So maybe the presence of COA findings can replace the LGU budget utilization rate. For SDG indicators under the following goals, I have rich list of indicators related to livable and sustainable communities. Maybe we can look at these indicators that are in the SDG 6, Goal 6, Goal 11, Goal 12, and Goal 13. And the last one under the indicator is the use of community-based monitoring system or CBMS. It is a rich source of data for city municipality level. And okay, sorry. So for the methodology for scoring, I think my suggestion is use target data instead of benchmark value. Because of the issues I presented a while ago, that it's not automatic that you get a value or normalized value between 0 and 1. The weights for indicators and aggregation formula should be also indicated in the methodology. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asek Del Prado, for your comments on how to improve the selection and weighing of indicators in the scorecard. So for our next reactor, may I call on Dr. Laura David for his reaction. Thank you.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat. First of all, I would like to congratulate the entire body for having such a study undertaken. No? It's about time. The study definitely highlighted the need for data collection, data management, and assessment. And that alone has to have a policy support. Kasi right now, the problem in data collection, no, sino ang magko-collect at then saan ilalagay. But kailangan siguro i-highlight ng study yung possible uses niya, which is internal assessment management for the LGU, no? Para hindi another layer of things that they have to do, but to actually show them that they need this. First of all, to show how how efficient their management options are, and to adapt accordingly kung kailangan. And then they should also be shown that such data collection can help them in external audit and public accountability. Lalo na yung external audit, using the latest oil spill problem. A lot of the LGUs are not able to collect from the insurance because there are no data of what was there before the oil spill. No, so and this has implications later. I'll talk about that later. But the governance is the number one issue, I think, which needs policy support because of the collection nga. Who collects and what's the database? The problem with a lot of LGU data, collected data, pag napalitan po si mayor, nawawala si data. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Marami sanang data tayo. Ano pa, naka-GIS pa, no? May time series pa. Pero pag nagpalit ng governance, nagpapalit din po. Nawawala po siya lahat. Either nawawala si laptop, si desktop, or basta lang nawawala yung data. So kailangan yun harapin. And then, hindi siya pwedeng black hole. If there is such a repository for the government, hindi pwedeng pag pinasok mo yung data, hindi mo naman siya ma-access. No? So we have also access problems. And then, there's the impact of tool in addressing national concerns, international obligations. Number one, yung sa climate adaptation. You know? In order to do anything about climate, you really need 30 years of data. If you don't have 30 years of data, it can just be a weather event, not a climate event. So mahirap siya pag wala. And then there's the international obligation of archipelagic lanes. So kailangan natin gawin, and I know it's now being tabled here in the House. Pero the problem with archipelagic lanes is, so we're obligated to give them 3 lanes as part of the UNCLOS, but that means we're exposing 3 areas to possible oil spill. So just like what the PCG showed, that there's been 400 in the last 13 years. So kailangan yung archipelagic lane na yun, meron kang data so that anytime something happens, meron kang masisingil. We also need a local a local policy on what to do with oil spill. Kasi kung international insurance lang susundin natin, lugi tayo parate, being the center of biodiversity. And then finally, we should start looking at all of this under the blue economy. No, what do we really mean by development? So as an archipelagic country, I know andito si Congressman Benitez. Thank you for the Blue Economy Bill. And then also the possibility of carbon sequestration and trading. Yun lang po. Salamat.
Thank you, Dr. David, for your comments, focusing on the methodology in collecting data. So our last reactor will be Dr. Jem Castillo. Sir.
I decided to bring my computer because I realize I'm just be adding to the different comments, and I already acknowledge, I think, the contribution by the 3 other panelists, but this one, because I'm more into data analytics, big data, and so on. So I decided to really find out if we are able to. So try to do some summarization and try to put it in a spreadsheet so that we can try and come up with a test. Nonetheless, the team has already undertaken a test for several cities. The first thing that I have to comment on the paper that was sent to me was, if we are going to do some identifying indicators, is we have to have a definition of what we mean by livable cities, what do we mean by blue economy, and what do we mean by green economy. Because the definition itself will tell us what are the dimensions or categories that needs to be included if we're talking about green economy, especially if we're talking about local government units, whether it's a city, whether it's a highly urbanized city, second-class city, or third-class, because you will have different definitions of green because they're in different levels of economic development. So it's very important for us to distinguish which indicator we apply to a highly urbanized city, which indicator is applied to a fifth-class municipality, which indicators will apply to a first-class municipality, and so on and so forth. So these are all very important. So first thing, define what is blue economy, define what is green economy, and also, as you will notice, I think recognizing that Honorable Benitez has already introduced a circular economy bill. How is it related to the circular economy? So there are quite a number of models on economy, and the circular economy is now being promoted as the new model of sustainable development because it's difficult to measure. Previous experiences of difficulty to measure sustainable development. And so they're promoting circular economy as a means of measuring. But at the same time, green economy and blue economy are actually important components of the circular economy. Can you please go to the next worksheet, because I'd like to show to you. What I did was try to come up with a gap if we are able to. The indicators worksheet, please. So when I talk about green economy, the first thing that I did was ask the question, are the indicators addressing, can you scroll a little to column E? Go back. So yeah, that's fine. It's because when we talk about green economy, have we covered renewable energy? Have we covered resource efficiency? Have we covered sustainable agriculture? Because right now the emphasis is circularity in agriculture and food systems, meaning in fact, the very challenging proposal is decoupling. Can we actually implement decoupling as part of the green economy? And then we have the green infrastructure. Do we have indicators for those, especially for highly urbanized cities? We have also circular economy, although it's a very big, broader than green economy and blue economy. We have to take into account like wastes, refuse, reduce, and so on. And then also biodiversity. So these are all components of green economy. So you have actually listed 46 indicators here in their paper, but we have to find out if they're able to address. I slide further to the right. Now for the blue economy. I'm not saying that these are perfect categories, but you have to think of whether these are all covered. Fisheries and aquaculture, circularity in fisheries and agriculture, or blue economy practices, shipping and transportation, tourism and recreation, renewable energy in the blue economy, biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. There's quite a high demand for this. So we have mineral resources, offshore minerals, ocean governance, and of course, climate change. All of them, the green economy and the blue economy, will have this kind of indicator. So try to come up with a gap analysis if we are able to capture. I'm not saying that these are all, because this is what I just got from online sources. So you have to really be clear. When I started doing this, I saw that, like for example, solid waste, where do we put solid waste? Where do we put liquid waste? Where do we put global public goods like carbon sequestration and so on? So these are the things that we have to, and also the other thing is that we tried using a scorecard for Laguna Lake Development Authority. And so we were successful in doing so. But it turns out that the LGUs were not adopting this. So we have to find a way for LGUs to accept the scorecard. Instead, they use the Ecosystem Health Scorecard, but it is LLDA who is undertaking it, but not the LGU, meaning there was no ownership of the LGU in terms of the scorecard. And then, of course, the last thing, because we are resource economists, actually, I call this incest because Asa and Jeff and others are actually members of our organization, so we have the same ideas. So trade-off in terms of data collection, how much will it cost us to collect more data? Should we just get it from FLUPs, CLUPs, CDPs, and so on? What are the indicators of Republic Acts that we should include in this set of indicators? Because these are the primary targets. If we are really saying that if we are successful in our policy implementation, we should have indicators for this policy that relates to blue economy, green economy, or circular economy, or the brown economy. So I think I've been given a sign that to wrap up. I just finished my conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jem, for your valuable inputs, particularly on identifying indicators under different economy models. Again, let me thank all of the panelists for their contributions in the improvement of the research paper. So for the open forum, let me transfer the handles to Congresswoman Stella Kimbo to moderate the discussions. Thank you.
Right, salamat. At magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Of course, first of all, congratulations to all our researchers for their excellent presentations and to the panelists. Napaka-husay ng ating mga presenters today. And actually, the truth is, napakaswerte po natin dahil kasama natin ang mga pinaka-mahuhusay na dalubhasa sa field na to. So we have award-winning researchers, si Dr. Laura David, award-winning po yan. Of course, Marine Science Institute, that's also globally recognized as a very competent research institute, and so on and so forth. Nakita naman natin ang kanilang credentials dun sa slides earlier. So thank you for sharing your talents with us. Parang feeling ko na sa isang private tutorial kaming 5 dito. Of course, I thank also my colleagues for joining today's roundtable discussion. This is the 5th of a series. So, since I have the mic, please allow me to ask the first question. And anyway, I think it's the most boring question, which is on methodology. So, ako na sigurong magtatanong muna tungkol doon, and then sila na lang magtatanong ng more interesting questions. So, listening to the interventions of the panelists, I think what we need to do when we're developing an indicator, and of course, this is a very, very important first step. So thank you for doing that. I believe wala pa nito, no? And we need this. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is to validate. And I think yung attempt po ninyo, kung tama ang rinig ko kay Dr. Salice, is you will begin to discuss with LGUs. I think that's one way to validate. But ang tingin ko po, because in my previous life, I've also developed indicators, but for health. Ang ginagawa po namin is we can do validation econometrically, right? Tama po yung sinabi ni Dr. Jem na sigurado ba tayo na yung nasama na ba dun sa indicator ang aspects ng green economy at nilabas niya ang kanyang nakakatakot na Excel file. At totoo nga naman, ang dami natin yatang nakaligtaan. So tama naman yung point niya. So I think his question has to do with validation. Kasi kung nagde-develop tayo ng score, ang tanong is, yung score ba na yan, ay nakakapture ba niya yung nais natin na makapture, which is livable community. Kasi yun po, di ba, score po natin kung livable ba ang community. So mas mataas na score, mas livable ang community. So ang ganda ng pinapropose. Nakakapag-compute tayo ng isang numero. So ang tanong, kapag may number ka na 100, ibig sabihin ba ay perfect, na talagang perfectly livable yung community na yan? Yun ang tanong, di ba? So how do we arrive at that validation? That's one. Number two, there's a challenge. Data availability, right? And of course, costs, capacity, etc., including willingness of the LGU to actually undertake this costly exercise, di ba? So, we need a scoring system that is simple enough, correct? Simple, but actually captures livable communities. Okay, how do we do that? We need, I think, to have a second step, which is to look for an outcome indicator so that you can check if your score correlates with that outcome indicator. Because kung maganda ang correlation nung score ninyo sa outcome na yan, ibig sabihin nun, tama, nakaka-capture ng score yung gusto natin na i-capture niya. Okay. Ano yung pwedeng outcome indicator na yun? So yun ang tanong. Pag titignan po natin ang pinopropose natin, emissions to air, impact on ecosystem, etc., we're just looking at items which reflect um, how livable, how attractive, how nice a city is or a community is. So sa tingin ko, and people vote by their feet. Pag maganda ang community, ang mga tao ay titira doon. At pag maraming tao ang titira doon, tataas ang land values. So ang tingin ko, ang maaaring isang outcome indicator, land values. So that's one possible outcome indicator, at least on the basis of economic theory, voting by their feet. It's a model by Thibault. Okay, so you can think of others, but what I'm saying is, and ma'am, our expert statistician can correct me, you can run models like principal components. Kasi the trick is, maaring yung mga items dito, they could be capturing the same variations. In which case, you don't need both of those because waste of time po yan, di ba? You have two variables, A and B. They move in the same way all the time. Waste of time kung i-capture natin pareho. Isa na lang, right? So, dun sa mahabang listahan ni Dr. Jemmy, 100 siya. Kung maswerte tayo, yung 99 doon, move in the same way, maswerte tayo. Isa na lang doon sa 99 ang i-collecta natin. So sa tingin ko, ang sagot doon, mag-run tayo ng principal components to determine what is the minimum set of indicators that will capture an outcome for livability. That is the step that I believe we need to do next. That, for me, is the internal validation of your indicator. Wala tayo pong choice. We need to publish it. Kasi kung hindi po natin ipapublish sa isang peer-reviewed article, mahirap pong ibenta at sabihin, Philippines, all LGUs, please, gawin niyo po ito. So, yun po ang aking suggestion. And I think it's something that is publishable. Kasi tingin ko one step na lang eh. Kasi kung yung land values, tingin ko that's something that is available. Or if you can think of something else that's tingin ko lang malaki ang chance na publishable siya. So yun po ang aking suggestion. And if you have comments or a response, be happy to hear that.
Ay, ma'am, thank you po for for raising that comment kasi we actually included yung principal component analysis during the proposal, but the problem is that yun nga po, in order for us to run that, we need the data. Yun lang po talaga, walang data, but we will take note po of that kasi it will save us time to pick the indicators na isasama namin. Thank you po.
And yun nga yun ni-raise ko with my co-researcher is that I think we also have to group, the indicators. What's the short term that we can have right now? A short term and the long term data that we can have. Because if we have to use these scorecards, we need data that can be categorized as short term. What's readily available for example, for the next 2 years that we can have, and then run the principal component analysis for that. And then later on, for what set of indicators should be on the long term to address, yung kawalan ng data na meron tayo. So, yun lang po.
Okay, so, Kong Ian?
Good afternoon po. I agree na kailangan talaga natin ng mas established na indicators para sa LGUs as we shift the responsibility to LGUs. Kasi LGUs naman talaga yung mas makaka-enforce ng environmental laws. However, gusto ko lang sana i-suggest na dapat meron din tayong indicators para makita natin kung meron bang adequate na support from the national agencies, lalo na dun sa battle ng mga LGUs against big companies like mining companies. Kasi minsan ang nangyayari, nagiging LGU versus mining companies and DENR. For example, in my district, there is an ongoing legal battle between the LGU of Gutalak and a mining company and the DENR. Why do I include the DENR na kalaban ng LGU? Kasi minsan, napaka-blatant nung mga violations ng mining company. Tapos, lumalabas na ang DNR kumakatig pa sa kanila. Example, nag-grant ng, itong particular case na to, nag-grant ang DNR ng exploration permit sa isang company for to study yung possible extraction of a certain mineral in Gutalak. Tapos dun sa exploration na yon, instead of, kasi pag ay mag-explore ka, kukuha ka lang ng sample, di ba? Tapos dadali mo sa laboratory. But they ended up cutting lots of trees in that area. Tapos, nung ni-report sa DNR, ang sabi ng DNR, mga illegal miners yon, illegal loggers yon, which is impossible. If you're familiar with mining operations, once sinecure na ng mining company yung area, hindi na makakapasok yung mga illegal loggers doon. So ang report nila, ganun. Tapos isa pang clear violation, exploration yun yung company yun nag-establish na gumawa na sila ng port, sariling port nila. So which indicates na gusto nila mag-operate na, magkumuha na ng minerals. So nickel, by the way, nickel yung gusto nilang kunin. Di ba topsoil lang nun. So madali lang sana yon. So nag-cut sila ng trees, nag-establish sila ng port. Tapos isa sa very blatant na violation is wala silang prior consent from the community and the IPs. So, pag titingnan nyo yung rules ng DNR, sinet ng DNR, ano yun, supposedly fatal flaw yun, fatal mistake. Pero gumagawa ang DENR at saka ang MGB, sila yung tumutulong sa mining company na maikutan yun. So, ang tanong ko, sa mga gatong instances, paano natin ma-encourage yung LGU to defend the environment kung ang DENR mismo ay tumutulong sa mga malaking kumpanya na i-disregard yung rules ng environment? Di ba po? So baka po pwedeng sa gagawin nating mga indicators na susundin ng LGUs, ibigay din wag natin i-shift yung responsibility 100% sa LGU. Because ang LGU mas gagawa yan ng trabaho nila pag merong support din ng national agencies. Ito, lumalabas, to be honest, mukhang merong may namemera dito di ba? Kasi bakit mo tutulungan yung big mining company na kahit na marami siyang violations, di ba po ang responsibility ng DNR at MGB is i-out na kagad yung company yun. But right now, ang LGU Gutalak, including my legal team, they are facing an uphill battle against this mining company. So ang question sa DENR is, will they even help the LGU in addressing this? Kasi ang laki ng gastos, legal pa lang. Tapos di ba dapat ang tutulungan ang DENR at ang LGU? So ang question ko is, paano natin maaasahan yung LGU tumulong sa DENR as far as environmental laws, enforcement of environmental laws are concerned if kung mga ganitong instances, hindi nga maasahan ng LGU ang DENR, di ba po? Yun lang po.
May we hear from the DNR? Paano natin ma-encourage ang LGUs?
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, it will be very difficult for me to answer on that issue. Coming from the Biodiversity Management Bureau, specifically for protected areas po kami. But that issue has been going on and we recognize that po and definitely will provide feedback to our superiors on that po.
Ang point ko lang po kasi is, before we even transfer the responsibility of safeguarding the environment to our LGUs, we must be sure na tayo mismo sa national agency ng DNR, 100% tayong tumutulong sa pag-enforce ng environmental laws. Di ba po?
Baka may insights ang ating researchers. Wala talagang...
Madam Chair, pwede
yes,
magsalita.
Dr. David.
Yes. I think in general, Congressman, the problem is mixed mandate. No? Kasi ang DNR, dalawang mandato niya environment and natural resources. So yung environment protect, yung natural resources make use. I think that's the problem there. Ang maganda is kung may national na usapan, what do we mean by development? in a certain area. Kaya nga yung blue economy is a good framework. Kasi if you mean development short term, sige, extract, right? But if you mean sustainable development, lalo na under the climate change lens, then there has to be a harmony between environmental protection.
Ano nga, I'm not even saying that we are against mining per se. What I'm saying is there are clear guidelines as far as the extraction of minerals are concerned. And there are clear violations as far as this particular company is concerned. Yet, the DNR and the MGB, they're not doing anything. In fact, they're trying to protect the mining companies. Alam naman natin na nag-shift na yung government, yung sa medyo encourage ng mining to generate income. Hindi, not just in the Philippines, but throughout the world. In fact, all over the world, problema talaga ang China. Kasi ang China has been trying to extract from every country possible, lalo na pag yung sa critical minerals. Pero dito po sa atin, ang laki ng problema natin. Kasi yung mga LGUs, hindi tinutulungan. Ang feeling ng LGU is piniperahan ng national government ang mga mining companies at their expense, at the expense of the environment also. So ang tanong lang po natin is, can we help them enforce the rules as far as DNR is concerned? Kasi sasabihin natin, tumabaho kayo to protect the environment. Kung yung DNR mismo yung sumisira sa environment, it doesn't make sense.
Siguro, Madam Chair, isa sa mga kailangan talagang harapin is the definition of small-scale mining versus large-scale mining. Kasi magkaiba yung process niya. Nickel, by definition, kahit na mom and pops yan na magkakasunod, should be looked at as a large-scale mining and should therefore undergo the same process as a large-scale mining, which is EIA, monitoring. Pag small scales kasi, sir, hindi kailangan eh.
Kasi po ganito po yun. Doon pa lang sa prior consent ng community at saka ng IPs, may violation na. And supposedly, it is a fatal violation. Supposedly, yung permit nun, dead na kagad. Here is regional DNR saying na pinagbigyan daw nila kasi ganito, ganyan. But wala kayong power na ganun. Pag sinabing fatal yun, fatal yun. So lumalabas ngayon, the legal battle remains between yung effort is sa amin na at saka ng LGU instead of DNR also helping us. Di ba po? Ang laki ng gasto sa legal battle, pwede namang hindi. So why is DNR not helping us? If DNR wants LGUs to help them, DNR must also help the LGUs.
I guess the bottom line is, kasi in the end, kung ma-institutionalize ang scorecard na to, obviously, it's going to be publicized. So, syempre, magiging very protective ang bawat LGU sa score na to kasi parang itong report card ng bawat anak, di ba? So, therefore, in that case, since magiging protective masyado ang LGUs, sisingilin niya ngayon ang DNR. Sabihin niya, oh, DNR ha, make sure na i-enforce mo lahat ng rules mo sa LGUs para sigurado na okay ang aking environment. So, it's important na may buy-in ng DNR dito sa ating scorecard. Yan naman ang magandang point na sinasabi ni Kong Ian. So, sana, sir, sana po ay ikwento mo kay Sec Tony itong magandang initiative na ginawa natin ngayong hapon. And anyway, we're still working on it. It's work in progress. Pero sana pagka oras na pwede na natin itong ma-propose as a policy, whether a bill or something that perhaps it can be institutionalized as an EO, as an AO, ay sana ay kasama namin ng DNR as a stakeholder, an important partner. Okay po? Yes, Dr. Salisa.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you po for the, I think the idea behind the scorecards is it also empowers the communities as well. So if you have the LGUs in the communities as well, kasi kung publicly available siya, and then it monitors the right things, tama yun, ma'am, we need to reduce the dimension through PCA or some other means. And I think that will be a powerful use ng scorecards because it empowers the communities. In terms of national planning and
economy versus environment. I think we're moving forward with the natural capital accounting initiatives as well. That actually puts into perspective both the ecosystem and the economics together. So I think if we develop that, then we have a powerful set of accounts that looks at both development and the environment as well. So yun lang po, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, Prof. Kiko?
Sorry, if I may ask. I guess I stepped out a little bit, so I didn't hear your question, Kong. But in line with the question of Kong Stella earlier, no, whether or not the scorecard as presented, at least, will track livability versus tracking sustainability. Ang pagkakaintindi ko, ang ginawa ninyo, sir, is to see if there's compliance on the local level to existing laws, right? Why was that the choice rather than doing what PSA is doing, which is tracking how close we are in terms of our efforts for sustainable development goals, right? Wouldn't it be simpler in terms of the choice of indicators to have a scorecard that follows sustainable development goals in general, that the PSA on the national level is already trying to track, and bringing it down to the level of an LGU? Because sorry, I should have started by saying thank you for doing this, because it's obviously needed. And we're going to keep on arguing about which specific indicators, and that probably might change over time, as a matter of fact, depending on what kind of data is readily available. But its main function, in a way, is to change mindsets on the local level for local governance to take these things into account, including, if they're not taking the data, be aware of it so they can start taking the data. No, and things like PENCAS makes, to what extent should local government units, for example, take account of both capital and flow accounts of their locality, right? Because if we give it to the PSA, they are able to do it, but they will certainly not be able to do it on the scale and the speed that we would need for it to be embedded properly in planning, right? You can institutionalize this by incentivizing them through SGLG, for example, or a bunch of other modalities, right? So yun na lang, sir, ma'am. First question is, I understand that it's to do with compliance with existing legislation, but this is the 19th Congress has been quite proactive in producing new legislation that is not part of the list that you are trying to account for. And there is an existing system in trying to at least contend with sustainable development goals as indicators and measurement of presumably livable and sustainable communities in general. So, bakit ho hindi dun nyo dinala? No? In terms of the sets of indicators. And just as because I'm sitting beside Kong Ana, may lalabas din na, sir, he should be part of the technical working group on the low carbon economy transition that Kong Ana is pushing as well. So there's a bunch of things, right? There's the coastal integrated coastal management, there's PENCAS, there's the blue economy, there's the circular economy, there's the low carbon economy, and so on. Before long, by the time, Madam Chair, the 19th Congress is done with all of these environmental and economic bills, I feel, kagaya nung kanina, maguguluhan na naman tayo sa dami. No? So somebody will have to sit down and do exactly what Dr. Jem has been suggesting. It's, okay, so how do you prioritize and make sense of all of this? So yun na lang, sir, muna yung question. Why compliance with current regulation versus, say, sustainable development goals?
Sir, actually, nung una po kasi, yung idea namin was that the scorecards can be used for policy compliance monitoring as well. Kasi we were actually thinking na magagamit siya for the improvement of IRRs, mga ganun po. Pero actually yung comment niyo po is better kasi mas direct na kung sa sustainable development goals namin siya i-base. So that's a very good ano po suggestion. Pero yun po yung initially iniisip namin sir nung una.
So second
Yes.
second question lang actually is I think again, and Mr. Avellino knows, baseline data is part of our uh, problem, right? And the oil spill has been a wake-up call. There are there's a lack of baseline data in general. So and I think that's part of the problem of PENCAS and when it actually starts getting pag matapos ma'am yung BICAM ng PENCAS, um, getting that on a large enough or targeted in terms of trying to find where the PENCAS should focus on. Because currently, I think the plan really is on protected areas, for example, no? To start from there. But for places where protected areas are not present, right, there must still be a way to do valuation of ecosystems. And the other one that is difficult, has been difficult to monitor because I don't think anyone is really thinking it through in that way, is one that has appeared again and again in our conversations with Kong Ana, which is that real estate and the built environment in general, so cities and urban development, we do not seem to have a framework that is similar to PENCAS, right? For ecosystem services, for environmental deprivation index, kasi you brought it up naman, diba? You also chose not to take the environmental deprivation index route, right? Which is another one that you could have taken. Um, so that's another piece that's missing. So bakit?
Uh, just a couple of comments, sir. Yeah, the whole idea before was to look at it from a compliance perspective. We keep moving with new laws, but we fail to monitor and evaluate. Ano pa? The old ones. Exactly, sir. That's the idea. And if you look at the what the for instance the seal of good local government, SGLG. What we noticed was that they were mostly measuring outputs, which is there's nothing wrong with that. So if you look at solid waste management, it looks at whether you have an MRF, whether you have built infrastructure that would address the needs of a management. Oh, if they have a management plan. But I think what is being failed to monitor there are the outcomes of these outputs. So I think this what the as I've said earlier, what we hope is that we will move from measuring outputs to measuring outcomes, which is basically what is much more important when we talk about SDG goals, I think. So yun po. Yung urban ecosystem po, medyo in terms of natural capital accounting, that is true. Medyo wala pa tayong framework on that. Exactly, sir.
Sorry, it doesn't even have to be natural capital accounting for ecosystems in urban
Right,
spaces. No,
right.
it really is sustainable development of urbanization.
Exactly, sir. Yes, sir. We have terrestrial forest, and we're actually doing marine and coastal for West Philippine Sea. But I think, yeah, I agree that urban ecosystems is something that will be a next frontier.
If I may just, yes, ma'am, if I may just address we have the City Biodiversity Index, sir, that we use. We frameworked it or we patterned it with the Singapore's tool on City Biodiversity Index, that's still in the initial phase. We've piloted some of the cities across the country, and we've planned to expand the area of coverage for this. So hopefully po, this can also be, as I mentioned earlier, this can also be incorporated in the plans for this scorecard, sir. Thank you, sir.
I have a quick question for Kong Kiko. I have not studied the PANCAS carefully. I'm sorry, but are any of these indicators also in the PANCAS accounting system?
Actually, the PSA maybe should be able to answer that.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am. Because they designed it as a capital and flow accounts. So
Ma'am,
they have to
Can you?
people encode the data set.
But
yeah.
but to me, the distinction between the PANCAS and this is what Sir said. The PANCAS captures output. This captures outcomes. Tama ba yun? The
No.
value of the flow.
I was talking about the incentives and what is being measured in the SGLG.
Ay,
ma'am.
sorry.
Yes,
pero
ma'am.
pero yung PANCAS is like GDP accounting, di ba?
Exactly, ma'am.
So, mini-measure natin yung flow. Tama ba?
That's right, Your Honor. So the
So,
PSA is,
kunwari, value of, let's say, extracted resources. Kasama yon.
yes, Your Honor. So currently, we already have mineral accounts, energy asset accounts,
Yes.
water flow
Oh,
accounts.
okay, and the like.
And-
All right, okay. Which is quite different from what we have here. All right, okay. So, at least that's clear to me. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I briefly?
Yes, Dr. Jem.
Yeah, because PENCAS essentially is we wanted to modify the GDP because the GDP, as it's currently measured, only measures marketed goods that's extracted in our nature. So that's the reason why we have the UN set the guidelines called the Central Framework, the UN System of Environmental Economic Accounts Central Framework to identify what commodities are being extracted from our nature. But there is a third component because the Central Framework only measures what goes into the economy that is valued. The contribution of the different ecosystems is not included in that Central Framework. So there was another guideline that was approved only in February of 2021, the UNSEA Ecosystem Accounting. The Central Framework and the Ecosystem Accounting comprises the natural capital accounts that will enhance or improve or supplement the gross domestic product, which only measures what goes into the economy. And so what's being measured by both the Central Framework and the Ecosystem Accounting, which covers the natural capital accounts, is essentially what's being contributed in spatial terms, because these are actually accounted in terms of geographic distribution, and the stock and flow of services already accounts for how much, for instance, is contributed by forest, how much is contributed by coral reefs, how much is contributed by mangroves, how much is contributed by seagrass and seaweeds. These are all covered in that framework, which is not actually captured by the current GDP measure.
Be added in maybe next year's GDP.
Yes,
All right.
hopefully, but it's
Hindi
actually
pa.
right now, the statistical standard, they still follow the system of national accounts, which I said, but to put it as a one, because although it's approved as a statistical standard, integrating them into the GDP measure in the next year would be difficult because we're just developing the methodologies and also doing pilot studies, as Dr. Isa mentioned, for the West Philippine Sea, for the coastal component. For the terrestrial component, we're doing it in Palawan, and then we are doing it in some other places, some of them funded by the UST, and some are funded by USAID. So we are just piloting the different tools and techniques that was actually specified in the UNSEA guidelines for the Philippine setting, because as you know, most of these UNSEA guidelines were modeled after developed countries, but very little models for particularly for Southeast Asia and the Philippines. Good enough that Philippines was part of the pilot site for the implementation of the UNSA guidelines. And so we have more experience, but we need persons to actually undertake it, because undertaking natural capital accounting will require technical experts, because we cannot just relegate it to the LGU. They don't have the capacity to do that. And so we are, in fact, with the help of, with our team of ASA and Jeff Arapak, we're doing capacity building on natural capital accounting, first at the academic institutions, because we thought that it would be difficult to go directly to the LGUs that don't have the capacity to undertake it right now at this point.
Salamat. By the way, you're the first forest economist that I've ever met.
Oh.
For, forest, di ba? Oh, forest economist who sees the forest, not the trees. Okay, Kong Kiko.
So the other problem actually was brought up by Dr. David, no? Which is obviously because this is so data dependent, having a proper or centralized repository that's transparent and useful across multiple LGU or even national changes in administration probably would help in making something like this useful, no? And its use value extended. Currently, Kong Ana has been having discussions with Climate Change Commission about creating such a centralized repository. Um, uh, so where would you think would be best? Because there may be more than one agency and more than one type of data repository, in which case, how would, in fact, putting these things together so that even if the scorecard is dependent upon multiple types of data, no, it can be made valuable or interoperable, I suppose. I can't think of any other. Standardized, no, so that when you draw it together into the scorecard, magagamit pa rin. On the assumption na magawa natin yung gusto ni Kong Stella, which is what's the smallest data set that will lead us to the outcome that we want.
Maybe Dr. Jem?
Actually, that's very relevant question right now. And yeah, we are also in discussing with DENR in terms of, because even before we started developing the NCA roadmap, we have been telling them to start improving your database system. And that was 2017. And so we are still in discussion now. They have good enough that they have set up their GDO, because right now our data repository is essentially PSA and TIS of DENR. But when we started assessing their data, they're basically using administrative data. They don't have these kinds of technical information. So what our proposition was actually based on experiences of natural capital accounting in other countries. For instance, Colombia, their repository is their central bank. The other one, other country, the repository is a university. And because, but we thought that the more stable repository would be a combination of academic institutions, national government agencies, because it's a network. Because the other repository that we have is NAMRIA for geospatial information. And so academic institutions, and that's the scheme I think that was being proposed or actually being developed right now by the DOST, using the CERDAL and CERDAC mechanism, where we have databases of networks of state universities developing this database for the regions. And so it should be a network, because we are now in the fourth industrial revolution, should be connecting databases among central offices. With going to the DENR database, that would be already filtered because it's basically for decision making, but the details, like detailed site information, can be housed in academic institutions.
Sorry, you were gonna respond as well?
Would the presenters agree?
Yeah, if I may, like for oceanography, we're thinking about the pattern that NOAA is using, and how the framework in NOAA in the US, So NOAA is the one who manage all the data set, but it contracted academic institution to make sure that all these data are research quality. if you observe in the Philippines, we don't have, data oceanographic center, for example, that, we have models for weather for Pag-asa, housed in Pag-asa, but for oceanography, we don't have operational or forecasting oceanography because we're lacking data center for oceanographic data. So we're thinking of like NAMRIA. They have a lot of potential to be the data center for the country. It's hard to house a data set in an academic institution due to the funding sustainability. We're just leaving project based. So we need, sustainability for that data center. So it
Sorry.
should be under the national government agency.
Maganda yung suggestion ni Kong Kiko sa Development Academy of the Philippines na lang. By the way, congratulations to Dr. Maha Ravago, who will be appointed as President of the DAP tomorrow. O, di ba? In-announce ko na bukas po mangyayari.
So sorry. So along the same lines, again, not quite clear in your indicator, in your scorecard, no, is something that Dr. David brought up, and I've been in conversations with Dr. David specifically about the blue economy component, no, which is also in Dr. Jem's long list of blue-colored indicators, which is really the spatialization of all of this, right? So that in order to help LGUs specifically plan development, is there a way for DNR, for example, to overlay with NAMRIA GIS some of these development initiatives, and in which case, what parameters and indicators and on the ground now might an LGU look at? For example, ecosystem services is one, but there may be other indicators, no? Like Kong Ana talks about the circular economy indicators, the climate change and low carbon indicators, among others. So there's a whole other series that can then be spatialized in such a way that it's helpful for the LGUs to do building planning, floor to area ratio for density against services, to do heat index, right? That will demand more trees to be built, for example, over roads, right? Even beyond biodiversity in an urban space, for example. So these might be other types of inputs that might be useful because we don't have, as far as I know, marine spatial planning experts. Si Dr. David ata ang pinakamalapit na doon. Di ba? At saka kayo, tama ho, wala akong oceanographic. So I think Kong Stella will file for such a center and then make sure it gets funded. Tama ba? In addition to... wag naman, maawa naman kayo. Kailangan namin nung planning. Diba? No, so that's the other aspect. So it seems like obviously the need for a scorecard like this is very clear. We can keep on fighting over the indicators specifically, but part of it might be you might want more than one type of scorecard, one that provides indication of compliance with existing laws, but one that might also provide us with aspirational goals, right? That has to do with, I don't know, anything from isa pa yan, donut economy. Kasi kumakain ka ng donut, naalala ko tuloy, right? Are your developmental plans and initiatives not going beyond the planetary boundaries, right? For development, while at the same time providing basic services and standards of living, right? That the people require. Right? So there are many models. So the idea of a scorecard may have more than one type, even of scorecard, depending again on what it is you want it to indicate at the end, di ba? that can push transitions. So as you said, solid waste management is, oh, do you have a landfill or not a landfill? But you're not measuring, are you reducing your plastic waste? Is there an increase in your composting internally, right? And so on and so forth. Those kinds of indicators might, which are not necessarily in legislation per se, unless Kong Ana's legislation finishes all the way to the Senate in the 19th Congress. Thank you, ma'am.
An example of a scorecard that is fairly simple and today is widely used is the Human Development Index, HDI, which covers only three things: GDP, mortality rate, and education. Ano nga ba? Life expectancy and literacy rate. Tatlo lang, right? So, and it's fairly easy to compute, readily available. And thinking about the experience of the HDI, it's owned by the UNDP, diba? So I guess there are already models, and therefore, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So tingin ko, ganun lang. So I'm not sure about NAMRIA. That's a government agency, right? So parang, di ba? At saka mapping lang siya, di ba? Anyway, inaaral pa naman yung indicator. So, pero maganda pag-isipan na yung mga tanong ni Kong Kiko, yun yung pang moving forward, right? So, but anyway, tingin ko lang, HCI is a good aspirational peg because it's easy to understand and it captures human development. Right? When I think about human development, I'm really just thinking about how much money I make, right? GDP, and whether how long I live, right? And whether I can read and write. Diba? Parang with that alone, you can say already that, okay, basically there's some development, right? So anyway, Kong Ana?
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just three things. I really appreciated being able to listen in. So thank you so much for arranging this and for inviting us. Maybe three things. First has to do with the content. To distill, while we're looking at efficient and effective solutions for livable communities, parang while you're considering your indicators, it would be good to see also how the nature-based solutions play into that. Like for example, the choice of materials like bamboo, forest materials that either way it's gathered, and then the valuation of ecosystem services as mentioned for the PENCAS, and then maybe a way to simulate also how these changes over time will affect or could impact an LGU's decision, like if an LGU decides to reclaim land, for example, to build, say, a park, but in the process, maybe it could impact also the marine life within the vicinity, then how does that, really help? So being able to value that or to quantify that. And then the process also by which the indicators, or sorry, how the scorecard is, how we come about with the scorecard. So maybe to capacitate, it's clear that we need to capacitate the LGUs, but it would be helpful also for the LGUs to know which development partners it can help or and which funds they can readily draw from that don't because they always, especially the fourth to sixth class LGUs, have limited budget, and they always need national government agencies to partner with, and of course, human capital, human resource constraints don't make that easy. So having private sector partners to work with and hold their hand would also help. So that's for the process. And then third, also the way the data shows up. It would, this has been mentioned before, even for the Tatak Pinoy, like the rationalization of committee memberships, how these issues, which have to do with geospatial planning, will always be in the picture. So this will also help us from seeing past silos and and then hopefully, well, hopefully that the data will get integrated also. So.
Anyone among the, oh, or Dr. Maha?
Yes, I just want to take us back and give the big picture of our discussion so we don't lose track. Of course, I'd like to congratulate the research team. It's far from perfect, but it's a step forward doing this, and we're very glad that it stimulate a discussion among the policymaker. But as the title itself said, scorecards for livable and sustainable communities, we must not lose sight that it's not a trade-off between the economy and the environment. It's really raising the standards of living of the Filipinos as embodied in the ambition and in the 8-point agenda. So while we are gathering data for the environment, it's really the agenda of the Philippines is lift our the 22% Filipinos out of poverty. So we can talk about sustainable community, sustainable environment, if we don't let them care for themselves, because their concern is only what to eat for the next meal, and it's hard for them to think about the next generation. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of that. So while we talk about GDP, it's also important to take into account the resources and the environment. That's why United Nations has this effort. It's already mentioned, the Green Net National Product. We still think about development, but we take into account the concerns for the environment and resources, not thinking about preserving the environment at all costs. Still, the well-being of the Filipinos that's important. So we use our resources in the economic terms efficiently, as long as the cost equals the benefits, or in vernacular term, we use our resources responsibly, not preserving it at all costs. Thank you.
Spoken like a true economist. Any comment from the presenters?
Just a general comment, and I think you had us at hello. I think we still at the first stage, which is basically looking at the indicators. But I think the discussion here just opened up how big the road that we need to travel from here. So I think it's just a big thank you to all the ideas and insights, and we are noting them very well. And hopefully we can address them, if not at the end of the project, in succeeding researches as well. So yun lang, ma'am. Thank you.
Any comments, questions from the audience, CPPRD? Oh yes, Mr. Avellino.
Thank you, ma'am. Just two things po that I want to address with regards to the repository po. As mentioned by Doc Jem, maybe we can look at the Geospatial Database Office that was newly established by the DENR. This is headed by Undersecretary CP David as well. It's also a platform that consolidates all of the environmental data and might be good to look at moving forward for this scorecard po.
Including ecosystem services?
We'll check onto that, sir. But yes po, sir. And in addition to that, sir, with regards to I'd like to address as well yung comments ni Congressman Amatong earlier. And in relation to the study, sir, maybe aside from looking at the outcome or classifying the outcome and output indicators, maybe we can look at classifying as well what are the input indicators and how does it correlates with the outcome indicators. No? Na-mention ni Congressman about the efforts of the national government agencies, but even the resources of the local government units. How does it affect the overall livability of these LGUs? So yun lang po so far. Thank you po.
All right. No further comments from the group. So again, big thank you to everyone. Wag po kayong mapapagod. But it's again a very, very important first step. So we look forward to hearing again from you at some time in the future. So thank you, everyone. And our next RTD will be on Monday. We will be covering West Philippine Sea. and government rightsizing. On Monday, no? Yes, Monday, not Wednesday. The morning session is on government rightsizing. So the presenter will be Dr. Ron Mendoza, former dean of Ateneo School of Government, and then the afternoon session is on the West Philippine Sea. Ta-dan! So please, we hope you can attend. All right, see you, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you.
Ay, before we go, we have sa photo shoot muna po bago umalis po. Thank you.